Fiskars X27 is by far the most popular splitting axe on the market, to the point where it's a default suggestion anytime the topic comes up. But there is an alternative that's pretty appealing to traditionalists and, buy it for life types who really appreciate high quality tools, and that's the Gransfors Bruk Large splitting axe. So I thought it would be good to do a comparison between the two axes, just to give people who are in the market a few things to think about before they make a purchase. So I guess we could start with the Fiskars. Fiskars X27, 6.1 pounds. The handle is 36 inches long. By contrast, the Gransfors Bruk is 31 inches. This is the long handle version of this large splitting axe. It also comes in a 27 inch. I want to say it's a 27 inch handle that has a little bit of a curve to it. It's 5.1 pounds, and it's a hickory handle with a metal protective sheath, and then it also comes with a leather cover with the snap on it. In fact, that's right. I took it out a while ago because I just don't use it that much, and it snaps on nicely. So, on the other hand, the Fiskars comes with a plastic cover that, in fact, I can see if I have that. So this is the Fiskars cover, and now this particular one is a few years old. So I know the newer model has like an orangish cover here, or an orange grip thing. I assume it's a little bit tacky for better grip, and then I'm not sure what the other differences are, but anyway, this is the X27. I assume not too significant of changes. It's got an all synthetic handle. Presumably it's got pretty good overstrike protection. It doesn't look any different, but I would assume it's a little bit reinforced. I haven't heard too many complaints about this handle breaking, so I assume it's legit. Before I get into the actual comparison in the testing while splitting, I wanted to give my assumptions about the differences in performance that I have going into this. The Fiskars is heavier and it's longer, so I would assume that strictly from a performance perspective, it'll actually perform better. But the length and weight is a double bit axe, if you will. In that it's harder to hit your spot, it's less accurate, and you'll get tired more quickly when using it, simply because it's heavier. So those differences could be largely preference. They could be depend on the individual, depend on your splitting style, but we'll see how it goes. So the actual test will involve splitting about 1/3 of a cord, roughly evenly, half with the Gransfors and then half with the Fiskars. And we're going to count a number of things, including the amount of time it takes to split the entire stack, but then also the number of strikes. And maybe we'll think of other criteria as we go. All right, we'll start with the Gransfors Bruk. I don't think I mentioned the price difference yet, which is actually a pretty important factor in the difference between these two axes. So this one goes for basically $199. Yeah, $200 for an axe, a splitting axe. Whereas the Fiskars sells for like $60, give or take, but that's about right. So. There is a huge price difference. Anyway. Silver maple, since that's all I got in sufficient quantities. It's not elm, that's for sure, but it's good only good way I have to compare the two. Oh, this one splits easy. Okay, that's half of the Gransfors stack. Now I'll switch over to the other one. Okay, so that was 43 sticks with the Gransfors. I don't know how many strikes it was yet, but we'll count that up on the video afterwards. Anyway, so here I go, round one with the Fiskars. Ooh, I felt that one. All right. That one's going in the knotty log pile. Get it? Knotty. Not bad. So, halftime impressions. The Fiskars did pretty well. It's, if you can hit your spot, which really isn't that difficult, the wood splits really nicely. I did a total of 39 sticks with the Fiskars in about 8.5 minutes, 8 minutes, something like that. I'll get the exact numbers afterwards. And then I did about 43 sticks in maybe around 10 minutes with the Gransfors. Other than that, it's pretty much what I kind of assumed it would be. There's no doubt the Fiskars is a beast, but it is a little bit unwieldy in a way. So One thing that I didn't really expect, that's actually a really nice side effect, is that you can use it as a pickaroon to pick stuff up. It's long enough that you can reach. You can, as long as it's sharp, you can kind of dig it into a log and then hoist it up onto this or move it around. I didn't really anticipate that, but it's actually something that's really nice about this. Okay. That was 50 with the Gransfors for the final leg of the test. I got to write down some thoughts about this and kind of think about it a little bit, but my first reaction for the second leg, where I went Fiskars for the first part of it, and then I went right into the Gransfors after that. While I was using the Fiskars, I thought, man, this thing is nice. So much, you feel like you have so much power. But there were a few times where I hit it and I could feel the vibration, and I thought, oh, that's kind of unpleasant. But it never feels good when you hit a knot. So maybe if I had hit that same strike with Gransfors, maybe it would have been the same. I don't really know. But then I switched over to the Gransfors. Well, I should say the consensus using the Fiskars was that I thought this thing is better than I had been inclined to give it credit for. But then I switched over to the Gransfors, and yeah, it felt shorter, and you had to swing a little harder. You didn't have the same power, but the agility and it seemed to cut a little cleaner, a little nicer. It could just be sharper, but again, it felt really, really good too. to be using it. So, like I said, I got to go and think this through a little bit, and then I'll give some final thoughts and wrap this thing up. By the criteria we established up front for this test, the Gransfors was actually more efficient with 1.2 strikes per stick versus 1.3 for the Fiskars. But after reviewing the footage, it looks like there was maybe more single split sticks in the Gransfors pile. So basically that's a 2 for 1. You know, you get 2 sticks for 1 strike. So that kind of skewed the results a little bit and made it sort of hard to, you know, read too much into those results. That same reasoning applies to other criteria as well, where the Gransfors appears faster at 6.43 sticks per minute versus 6.27 sticks per minute for the Fiskars. Honestly, I feel like it could have been the exact opposite if I redid the same test, but with different, you know, configuration of the piles. So then maybe more important of a difference is the splitting style that I used, which doesn't necessarily favor the Gransfors, but it certainly doesn't, you know, let the Fiskars shine the way I feel that it could have in a more like freestyle style, where you're not using a chopping block, you're just kind of going after it, where the longer reach would be, you know, pretty big benefit. So the sticking for the silver maple wasn't really different, but I did notice that the sort of the reverse wedge shape on the Fiskars had the capability to get stuck a little bit. It made it a little bit more difficult to pull it out, particularly when I tried splitting some elm with it, because elm has this tendency to you'll keep hitting it and wedge open your spot, and pretty soon the axe head is pretty much buried in a log and it's still not splitting, because the fibers on elm keep it together. But that became kind of a problem with that reverse wedge shape on the Fiskars. You know, that doesn't really happen with the Gransfors just because of the shape of the head. But then maybe the biggest downside to the Fiskars was, you know, the vibration from the handle when you had a strike that just didn't go quite right, and then the overall feel. Synthetic handle, it just can't really compare to solid hickory, in my opinion. It just doesn't feel quite as nice, and then you also can't replace it if it breaks. That said, you could buy 3.3 Fiskars for every Gransfors, so I mean, it's a little bit of a wash in that way. So my attempt at a quantified comparison failed a little bit because, like I mentioned, the stacks configuration. So getting some actual numbers on it didn't quite work out. I'd say the biggest differences are the overall quality and, of course, the price. So then, let's see, assumptions I had starting out were mostly accurate, I feel, except that the actual performance I anticipated from the Fiskars didn't really show up. Again, it could just be because of the way I was doing it and because of silver maple. It might be more apparent in other wood. But then also the fatigue factor and accuracy factor, those didn't matter at all. It was basically the same. You know, you'd think maybe it would be a little bit more tired, but you actually can get away with swinging not quite as hard with the additional length. So then, in the end, I found myself wishing for the option of a slightly longer and heavier Gransfors, you know, or a few tweaks on the Fiskars would go a long ways. If you get a more durable handle, or not necessarily durable, but non-synthetic handle, and then, as I mentioned, get rid of that reverse wedge shape on the head, and I think that would go a long ways. Also, the slope of the kind of the beard and the top of it I think that made a difference too when you're trying to pop it out of the log. If you're pushing down on the handle, having a little bit of a curve on it, you know, a little bit of a beard on the axe helps it pop out a little bit easier. So I noticed when it was buried, the Fiskars was a little bit more of a challenge to take out. Again, not with the silver maple, because that didn't matter, but with the elm that I tried. I should have got more footage of that. But anyway. So, in conclusion, the Fiskars is a great tool, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to anyone, honestly. It does what you expect of it, and it's only $60. So if somebody's asking for an axe, I'm gonna mention that, the Fiskars. But again, if you want a little nicer tool, something that you're gonna, you know, pass on to your kids or grandkids or whatever, Fiskars or the Gransfors Bruk is a great investment. So that's about it.